James Simpson's reproductive fluids are about to become the most sought-after substance on an alien world. As his battered spacecraft plummets through Zephyria's atmosphere, the human biologist grits his teeth, fighting to maintain control. The desert planet's surface rushes up to meet him, a vast expanse of sand and rock. With a bone-jarring impact, the ship slams into the ground, skidding to a halt in a cloud of dust and debris. Heart-pounding, James unbuckles himself and stumbles towards the airlock. He pauses, checking his environmental suit for breaches before cycling the door open. Hot, dry air blasts his face as he steps out onto alien soil for the first time. His moment of awe is short-lived. A group of reptilian creatures emerges from behind nearby rock formations, surrounding him. Their scales shimmer in the harsh sunlight, eyes fixed on James with unmistakable curiosity. One of them, a female with intricate patterns on her hide, steps forward. "I am Aura," she says in a rasping voice, her translator working flawlessly. "You are human?" James nods, trying to appear non-threatening. "Yes, I'm James Simpson, a biologist from Earth. My ship crashed and I—" He's cut off by a sudden commotion among the aliens. They're sniffing the air, bodies tensing with excitement. Aura's eyes widen as she approaches him, nostrils flaring. "You carry a scent," she hisses, her voice filled with wonder. A scent unlike anything we've encountered before. The other aliens, Voth, James realizes, press closer, their excitement palpable. James takes a step back, unsure of their intentions. Aura turns to her companions, speaking rapidly in their native tongue. James catches fragments through his translator. Rare, delicacy, powerful aphrodisiac. With growing unease, James realizes they're talking about him, or more specifically, his bodily fluids. His mind races, trying to comprehend the implications of this discovery. The Voth's debate grows heated. Some argue for immediately harvesting James's fluids, while others insist on studying him further. Aura, her gaze locked on James, raises her voice above the others. "We must bring him to the city," she declares. "The council will decide his fate." Relief washes over James, quickly tempered by the realization that he's merely traded one precarious situation for another. As the Voth escort him across the scorching desert, he marvels at their adaptation to this harsh environment. His own suit struggles to maintain a safe internal temperature. Hours later, they descend into an underground metropolis carved from the bedrock itself. Cool air envelops them as they enter vast caverns filled with bioluminescent fungi and advanced technology. James is brought before the Voth Council, a group of elder reptilians seated on ornate stone thrones. As Aura presents their findings, James notices the worry etched on the council members' faces. He soon learns why. Zephyria is facing a critical shortage of water and other vital resources. The Voth are desperate for solutions, and James's unique biology might hold the key to their survival. The council debates James' fate, their words a mix of scientific curiosity and barely concealed desperation. James finds himself torn between self-preservation and the potential to help this struggling civilization. And then there's Aura, whose passionate defense of further research doesn't quite mask her personal interest in the human. Finally, the council reaches a decision. James will be kept in a secure facility for study, with Aura assigned as his primary researcher and caretaker. As he's led to his new quarters, James's mind whirs with possibilities. Should he attempt escape at the first opportunity? Or could cooperation with the Voth lead to groundbreaking discoveries for both species? One thing is certain. James Simpson's arrival on Zephyria will change the course of two civilizations forever, and it all hinges on the newfound value of his most intimate bodily fluids. James followed Aura through the winding corridors of the underground city, his mind still reeling from the council's decision. The cool air of the caverns was a stark contrast to the scorching heat above, and he found himself grateful for the reprieve from his environmental suit's struggling temperature controls. As they approached a massive set of intricately carved stone doors, Aura turned to him. "This is the research facility where you'll be staying," she explained, her scales shimmering in the bioluminescent light. "It's our most advanced complex." The doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a vast chamber filled with an array of alien technology. James's eyes widened as he took in the sight of glowing screens, pulsing energy fields, and strange apparatus he couldn't begin to comprehend. "Dr. Zax, Dr. Kyla," Aura called out, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Our guest has arrived." Two Voth emerged from behind a cluster of holographic displays. The first, Dr. Zax, was tall and lean, with deep green scales and piercing yellow eyes. Dr. Kyla, in contrast, was shorter and stockier, her hide a mottled brown. "Fascinating," Dr. Zax murmured, circling James with undisguised interest. "I've never seen a species quite like this before." Dr. Kyla approached, holding out a device that emitted a soft blue glow. "If you'll permit me, I'd like to take some initial readings." James nodded, trying to quell the unease in his stomach. As Dr. Kyla's device hummed and beeped, Aura began to explain the situation. "James, our world is facing a crisis," she said, her voice tinged with worry. "Our water reserves are critically low. We believe your unique biology might hold the key to our survival." Dr. Zax picked up the thread. "Our initial scans detected compounds in your bodily fluids that are entirely unknown to us. We hypothesize that your DNA might contain adaptive properties that could revolutionize our water conservation efforts, or even allow us to synthesize water from the limited resources available on our planet." James listened, his scientific curiosity piqued despite his precarious situation. "I understand," he said slowly. "What exactly do you need from me?" "For now, just some non-invasive tests," Dr. Kyla assured him. "Samples of saliva, sweat, blood, nothing too demanding." Over the next few hours, James submitted to a battery of tests. He spat into vials, had his blood drawn, and stood still while various scanning devices passed over his body. Throughout it all, Aura remained by his side, explaining each procedure and answering his questions about Voth physiology and culture. As they worked, James found himself drawn to Aura. Her intelligence and passion for her work were evident, and he couldn't help but admire the way her scales caught the light as she moved. He noticed her watching him too, her eyes lingering on his alien features, with a mix of scientific curiosity and something more personal. Days passed, blurring together in a whirl of tests and analysis. James spent most of his time in the research facility, but Aura also showed him parts of the underground city. He marveled at the ingenuity of the Voth, who had carved out a thriving civilization in this harsh environment. One evening, as James and Aura were reviewing some test results, Dr. Zax burst into the room, his eyes wide with excitement. "We've made a breakthrough," he exclaimed, his tail lashing back and forth. "James, your DNA contains a gene sequence unlike anything we've ever seen. When combined with Voth genetic material, it could potentially create a hybrid capable of producing water through a process similar to photosynthesis." The implications of this discovery hit James like a physical blow. He saw the excitement in the Voth scientist's eyes, but also recognized the potential consequences for himself. Would they see him as nothing more than a valuable genetic resource now? Before he could fully process this thought, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Dr. Kyla rushed in, her scales pale with fear. "It's Scar and his followers," she gasped. "They've breached the outer defenses. They're coming for James." James's heart raced as he realized the full extent of his predicament. He was trapped underground on an alien world, caught between those who would use him for his genetics and those who saw his very existence as a threat. As the sounds of conflict grew nearer, he knew he had to make a choice, and fast. Aura grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "We need to get you to safety," she hissed. "Follow me." As they raced through the twisting corridors of the research facility, James's mind whirled with possibilities. Could he find a way to escape in the chaos? Should he stay and help the Voth, possibly sacrificing his own freedom in the process? And what about his growing feelings for Aura? The choice loomed before him, as immediate and inescapable as the approaching sounds of battle. James's heart pounded as he raced through the twisting corridors with Aura, the sounds of conflict growing louder behind them. They ducked into a small alcove, catching their breath as a group of armed Voth rushed past. "We can't keep running forever," James whispered, his mind racing. "What exactly is happening?" Aura's scales rippled with tension as she explained, "It's Scar and his followers. They've discovered your presence and view you as a threat to our species. We need to get you to a secure location. As they continued their frantic journey through the facility, James became acutely aware of the growing unrest within the Voth community. Snippets of overheard conversations and the increased security presence painted a clear picture. His unique genetic properties had become a flashpoint for controversy. Over the next few days, James found himself confined to a high-security section of the research facility. The atmosphere was tense, with guards posted at every entrance. Despite the circumstances, Aura visited him frequently, ostensibly to conduct further research. During one such session, as Aura took a blood sample, James noticed her touch lingering longer than necessary. Their eyes met, and he felt a spark of connection that transcended their biological differences. Aura quickly looked away, her scales flushing a deeper shade of green. "I'm sorry about all this," she said softly, gesturing to the security measures. "It's for your protection as much as ours." James nodded, understanding the complex situation they were in. "I appreciate your kindness, Aura. You've made this whole experience bearable." Their conversations began to extend beyond purely scientific matters. James found himself sharing stories of Earth, while Aura described the rich history of Zephyria. With each interaction, the attraction between them grew, complicated by the ethical implications of their situation and the vast cultural divide. One evening, as they reviewed test results together, Dr. Zax burst into the room, his eyes wide with excitement. "We've made a breakthrough," he exclaimed. "James, your DNA contains a gene sequence that, when combined with Voth genetic material, could potentially create a hybrid capable of producing water through a process similar to photosynthesis." The implications hit James like a physical blow. He saw the excitement in the Voth scientist's eyes, but also recognized the potential consequences for himself. Before he could fully process this information, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Dr. Kyla rushed in, her scales pale with fear. "It's Scar and his followers," she gasped. "They've breached the outer defenses. They're coming for James." In the chaos that followed, James found himself shuttled between secure rooms as the facility's defenses were tested. Through overheard conversations and Aura's worried whispers, he learned of Chief Counselor Vex's plans for a breeding program and the development of an extraction device for his reproductive fluids. During one research session, James experienced the prototype extraction device firsthand. The discomfort was significant, and he couldn't help but wonder if this was just the beginning of more invasive procedures. As tensions escalated, James accelerated his escape plans. He used his time with Aura to gather information about the facility's layout and security protocols. During one session, when Aura stepped away to retrieve some equipment, James seized the opportunity to access a computer terminal. His fingers flew across the alien interface, downloading crucial data about Voth technology and the location of his crashed ship. Aura returned, pausing as she saw James hastily move away from the terminal. Their eyes met, and for a moment, James feared she would report his actions. Instead, she simply nodded and continued with their work. In the days that followed, Aura began slipping James small pieces of information, guard rotations, access codes to restricted areas. She never explicitly acknowledged what she was doing, maintaining plausible deniability, but James understood. Their silent conspiracy deepened their bond, even as it complicated their loyalties. As James finalized his escape plan, he learned of Dr. Zax's latest breakthrough, the ability to create a viable Voth human embryo. The news spread quickly, reaching both the Voth Council and Scar's group. James knew his window of opportunity was closing fast. On the night of his planned escape, James waited anxiously in his quarters. The facility hummed with an unusual energy. Something big was happening. Just as he prepared to make his move, Aura burst into the room, her scales pale with urgency. "James, you need to go now," she hissed. "Counselor Vex has ordered the immediate implementation of the breeding program. They're coming for you." Heart racing, James nodded. "Come with me," he said impulsively, reaching for her hand. Aura hesitated, conflict clear in her eyes. I can't. My people." Before she could finish, the facility rocked with a massive explosion. Alarms blared as the lights flickered ominously. "Scar," Aura whispered, fear etching her features. James knew it was now or never. He grabbed the small pack he had prepared and moved toward the door. Pausing, he turned back to Aura, their eyes meeting in a moment of unspoken communication. "The power core," she said quickly. "Overload it. It'll give you cover." With a nod of thanks, James slipped into the chaos-filled corridor. As he navigated the twisting passages, using the access codes Aura had provided, the sounds of conflict grew louder. Voth security forces rushed past, weapons drawn, while distant explosions shook the facility. James reached the power core, his heart pounding as he input the final sequence to trigger an overload. As the core began to pulse erratically, he turned to make his escape, only to find himself face-to-face with a group of armed Voth, their scales marked with the distinctive patterns of Scar's Extremist. In that moment, as the power core behind him reached critical levels and the armed Voth advanced, James realized his escape had only just begun. As the power core's erratic pulses intensified, James made a split-second decision. He lunged forward, catching the armed Voth off guard. In the confusion, he managed to slip past them, using his agility to dodge their grasping claws. The facility plunged into darkness as the power core overloaded, emergency lights flickering to life. Alarms blared, their piercing wail adding to the chaos. James's heart pounded as he navigated the twisting corridors, relying on his memorized layout and the dim glow of the emergency lighting. He rounded a corner and collided with a figure in the darkness, his muscles tensed, ready for a fight, but a familiar voice cut through the noise. "James!" Aura hissed, her scales reflecting the pulsing red emergency lights. "This way!" Without hesitation, James followed her. They ducked into a narrow maintenance tunnel, the sounds of conflict echoing behind them. Aura led him through a labyrinth of passages, her knowledge of the facility's hidden network proving invaluable. "How did you find me?" James whispered as they paused to catch their breath. Aura's eyes met his in the dim light. "I couldn't let them take you," she said softly. "What they were planning, it wasn't right." A distant explosion rocked the facility, sending dust cascading from the tunnel ceiling. They pressed on, Aura guiding them through a series of twists and turns that left James disoriented. Suddenly, Aura halted, her head tilted as if listening. She pressed a hidden panel, revealing a concealed chamber. They slipped inside, the door sealing behind them with a soft hiss. James blinked as bright lights illuminated the room. His eyes widened as he took in the array of equipment and glowing displays. "What is this place?" "A secret research lab," Aura explained, moving swiftly to a central console. "It contains prototypes based on your DNA, technology that could solve our water crisis." Understanding dawned on James. He joined Aura at the console, his scientific curiosity overriding his urgency to escape. Together, they began downloading data and gathering portable components. "This could change everything," James murmured, examining a device that hummed with potential. Aura nodded, her scales rippling with excitement and tension. "It's why we can't let it fall into the wrong hands, Scar's or the Council's." They worked quickly, acutely aware of the battle raging above them. As they prepared to leave, James paused, struck by the gravity of the moment. He turned to Aura, seeing the same mix of fear and willpower in her eyes that he felt. "Thank you," he said simply, reaching out to squeeze her hand. Aura's scales flushed a deeper green, but before she could respond, a muffled explosion reminded them of their precarious situation. They slipped back into the maintenance tunnels, their packs now heavy with stolen technology and data. As they neared the surface exit, voices echoed from an adjoining corridor. Aura froze, recognizing the distinct speech patterns of Scar's followers. She signaled to James, and they pressed themselves against the wall, hardly daring to breathe. The voices grew louder, and suddenly a group of armed Voth rounded the corner. For a heartbeat, both parties stood in shocked silence. Then chaos erupted. James reacted instinctively, years of martial arts training kicking in. He ducked under a swinging tail, using the Voth's momentum against them. Beside him, Aura moved with surprising agility, her smaller size allowing her to evade the attacker's grasp. The confined space of the tunnel worked to their advantage, limiting the number of Voth that could engage them at once. James landed a solid punch on one attacker, sending them reeling back into their companions. Aura used her knowledge of Voth anatomy, striking at vulnerable points with precision. Working in tandem, they managed to overcome the group, leaving the stunned extremists unconscious in the tunnel. James and Aura exchanged a look of shared amazement at their unexpected teamwork. Breathing heavily, they emerged onto the planet's surface. The sudden transition from the facility's artificial environment to Zephyria's harsh climate was jarring. Wind whipped sand against their faces, the air thick with swirling particles. "A sandstorm," Aura shouted over the howling wind. "It'll cover our tracks, but we need to find shelter." James nodded, squinting against the stinging sand. He pulled out a small device, checking the data he had downloaded about his ship's location. "This way," he called, pointing into the tempest. They pressed forward, the punishing wind threatening to knock them off their feet. Aura's expertise in navigating Zephyria's treacherous environment proved crucial, as she guided them around hidden pitfalls and disorienting dunes. James found himself marveling at Aura's resilience. Despite the alien nature of her scaled form, he felt a growing connection to her, a bond forged through shared danger and mutual trust. As the storm intensified, Aura spotted a small opening in a rocky outcropping. They ducked inside, finding themselves in a shallow cave barely large enough for both of them. Pressed close in the confined space, James became acutely aware of Aura's presence, the smooth texture of her scales, the subtle scent that was uniquely hers. Their eyes met in the dim light filtering through the cave's entrance. For a moment, the chaos of their escape faded away, replaced by a different kind of tension. James felt an overwhelming urge to reach out, to explore the alien yet alluring contours of Aura's face. Aura's breath quickened, her scales flushing with color. She leaned in slightly, her gaze flickering to James' lips. The air between them seemed to crackle with possibility. A particularly violent gust of wind shook them from the moment, sending a spray of sand into the cave. Reality came crashing back. They were fugitives on an alien world, carrying stolen technology that could reshape the future of two species. As they settled in to wait out the storm, James and Aura began to talk. Their conversation flowed easily, spanning topics from the intricacies of Earth's diverse ecosystems to the complex social structures of Voth society. James found himself captivated by Aura's insights, seeing his own world through new eyes as he described it to her. In turn, Aura opened up about the true extent of Zephyria's water crisis. The desperation in her voice made James's heart ache, and he began to understand the impossible situation the Voth found themselves in. Hours passed, the howling wind gradually subsiding. As the storm cleared, they emerged from their shelter, blinking in the harsh sunlight. The landscape had been transformed, familiar landmarks buried beneath new dunes. James consulted his device, realigning their course towards his crashed ship. They set off across the shifting sands, their shared ordeal having forged a deep connection between them. As they crested a final dune, James's heart sank. The wreckage of his ship lay before them, stripped and gutted by Voth salvage teams. Yet hope wasn't lost. James's trained eye spotted components that could still be of use. Working together, they cobbled together a makeshift communication array, combining the remnants of James's ship with the Voth technology they had brought from the facility. With breathless expectation, they activated the system. A crackling signal emanated from the jury-rigged device. James's fingers flew over the controls, encoding a distress message to the nearest human outpost. As the message transmitted, a warning light flashed on the console. "The signal's been intercepted," James said, his voice tight with tension. Aura's scales paled. "By whom?" Before James could answer, the sound of approaching vehicles reached their ears. They scrambled to the top of a nearby dune, their hearts racing. In the distance, dust clouds rose from multiple directions. James raised a pair of binoculars, his breath catching as he made out the distinct markings of Voth Council vehicles, Scar's Extremist faction, and in the far distance, the unmistakable silhouette of a human rescue ship. He lowered the binoculars, meeting Aura's worried gaze. The weight of their situation pressed down on them. Their next move would shape not just their own fates, but potentially the future of human-Voth relations and the survival of an entire species. As the vehicles drew closer, James and Aura exchanged a look of determination. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Together. A moment of silent communication passed between them, years of scientific training and survival instincts coalescing into a singular purpose. James's fingers flew over the salvaged components, repurposing the makeshift communication array. "We need to level the playing field," he muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration. Aura nodded, her scales rippling with nervous energy as she kept watch. "What's your plan?" "We turn their curiosity into our advantage," James replied, connecting the final wire. He activated a beacon from his damaged ship, amplifying it with the Voth technology. The device hummed to life, broadcasting a signal that would be impossible for any of the approaching parties to ignore. "I've just told everyone we have the water-generating prototype," James explained, his eyes meeting Aura's. "Now, we wait." They didn't have to wait long. The first vehicle to crest the dune bore the insignia of the Voth Council. As it ground to a halt, a familiar figure emerged. Dr. Zax, his scales a mottled pattern of stress and anticipation. "James! Aura!" he called out, his voice carrying on the wind. "We need to talk." Before either could respond, a second group of vehicles roared into view. The jagged emblem on their sides left no doubt. Scar's Extremist had arrived, armed and radiating hostility. The standoff was interrupted by a high-pitched whine from above. James's heart leapt as he recognized the sleek lines of a human scout ship, responding to his earlier distress call. It descended rapidly, kicking up a cloud of sand as it touched down. In a matter of moments, the desolate landscape had transformed into a powder keg of conflicting interests. James and Aura found themselves at the center, clutching the prototype that had suddenly become the most valuable item on the planet. Dr. Zax approached cautiously, his eyes darting between James and the armed extremists. "James, please," he began, his voice low and urgent. "Give us the technology. We can guarantee your freedom, your continued cooperation with our research. Think of what we could achieve together." From the other side, Scar's voice rang out, harsh and uncompromising. "Destroy that abomination. The mixing of species will be our downfall." The hatch of the human scout ship opened with a hiss, revealing a woman in a captain's uniform. She surveyed the scene with a mix of confusion and perseverance. "James Thompson?" she called out. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen. We received your distress signal. We're here to extract you immediately." James felt Aura tense beside him. He placed a reassuring hand on her arm, his mind racing to find a solution that wouldn't end in bloodshed. Before he could speak, a low rumble filled the air. All eyes turned to the horizon, where a massive wall of swirling sand was rapidly approaching. The impending sandstorm dwarfed their conflict, promising to engulf them all in its fury. "We need to find shelter," Aura shouted over the rising wind. "There's a network of caves not far from here. It's our only chance." For a moment, no one moved. Then, as if a spell had been broken, there was a flurry of activity. Self-preservation overcame hostility as all parties scrambled to gather their equipment. "This way," James called out, taking the lead alongside Aura. They navigated the shifting dunes with the confidence of those who had already survived one storm, using the salvaged Voth technology to guide them through the worsening visibility. The diverse group straggled behind them, Voth scientists, human rescuers, and armed extremists alike, all united by the common threat of nature's wrath. As they reached the cave entrance, the storm hit in full force. Sand pelted their bodies as they rushed inside, the howling wind making communication nearly impossible. Once inside, an uneasy silence fell over the group. Enemies stood shoulder to shoulder in the confined space, eyeing each other warily. James and Aura exchanged a glance, knowing that the real challenge was just beginning. As the storm raged outside, James set up the water-generating prototype in the center of the cave. Dr. Zax hovered nearby, his scientific curiosity overriding his earlier caution. "Let me show you what this can do," James said, his voice carrying in the enclosed space. He activated the device and a soft hum filled the air. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, moisture began to condense on its surface. A collective gasp went up as the first drops of water formed, coalescing into a small but steady stream. Even Scar's followers leaned in, their earlier hostility momentarily forgotten in the face of this miraculous technology. Captain Chen watched the demonstration with growing understanding. She stepped away, speaking quietly into her communicator. "Command, this is Chen. We have a situation here that requires immediate diplomatic intervention. Prepare for first contact protocols." As the prototype continued to produce water, James found himself drawn into a heated discussion with Dr. Zax and several of Scar's more scientifically inclined followers. They debated potential applications, ecological impacts, and the ethical implications of the technology. Aura, meanwhile, engaged with Captain Chen, explaining the intricacies of both society and the water crisis that had driven them to such desperate measures. The human captain listened intently, her expression growing more thoughtful with each passing moment. In a quiet corner of the cave, James and Aura finally found a moment alone. The weight of the day's events, the constant tension, and their shared ordeal crashed over them. Without a word, they fell into each other's arms, their lips meeting in a kiss that bridged the gap between their species. As they parted, breathless and slightly dazed, James stroked Aura's scaled cheek. "Whatever happens next," he whispered, "we're in this together." The sound of shifting sand outside signaled the storm's passing. As the group emerged from the caves, they found a landscape transformed. Dunes had shifted, familiar landmarks buried or revealed anew. But it wasn't just the physical terrain that had changed. The forced proximity in the caves, the shared experience of survival, and the undeniable potential of the water-generating technology had altered the dynamics between the factions. As they gathered under the harsh Zephyrian sun, there was a palpable sense of possibility in the air. James and Aura stood at the forefront, their hands intertwined. They faced the assembled group, Voth Council members, human rescuers, and even Scar's once hostile extremists, knowing that the next few moments could shape the future of two species and an entire planet. Captain Chen stepped forward, her communicator buzzing with incoming transmissions from her superiors. Dr. Zax moved to stand beside her, representing the Voth Council. Even Scar, his earlier vitriol tempered by the reality of the situation, joined them. As the impromptu negotiations began, James squeezed Aura's hand. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with potential pitfalls and challenges. But as he looked into her eyes, he felt a surge of hope. Together, they had already overcome impossible odds. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side, pioneers in a new era of interspecies cooperation. Cooperation. The first rays of the Zephyrian sun bathed the gathered group in a warm golden light, highlighting the stark contrast between human and Voth features. James cleared his throat, his voice carrying across the still air. "We've seen what this technology can do. It's not just about water, it's about our future, both human and Voth." Aura nodded, her scales glinting as she addressed the group. "This is our chance to move beyond conflict and work together for mutual benefit." Captain Chen stepped forward, her communicator buzzing with incoming transmissions. "I've informed my superiors of the situation. They're dispatching a diplomatic team led by Ambassador Marcus Reeves to handle negotiations." Dr. Zax's eyes widened at this news. A human diplomatic team? Here on Zephyria? He turned to James, excitement evident in his voice. This could be a historic moment for both our species. As the group dispersed to prepare for the diplomat's arrival, James and Dr. Zax huddled around the water-generating prototype. They worked tirelessly, fine-tuning its components and discussing potential improvements. "If we adjust the resonance frequency here," James suggested, pointing to a specific part of the device, "we might be able to increase the water yield by 15%. Dr. Zax nodded enthusiastically, his scales rippling with excitement. "Brilliant. And if we recalibrate the moisture extraction matrix, we could potentially double that improvement." Their collaborative efforts paid off. Within hours, the prototype was producing water at a rate that exceeded even their most optimistic projections. The sight of the steady stream of clear, life-giving liquid had a profound effect on all present, especially Scar and his followers. Scar approached the device cautiously, his earlier hostility replaced by a mix of wonder and cautious hope. I never thought I'd see anything like this in my lifetime," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. The peaceful atmosphere was shattered by the arrival of Counselor Vex. His convoy of vehicles kicked up a cloud of sand as they screeched to a halt. Vex emerged, flanked by Voth security forces, his bearing imperious and confrontational. "I am taking control of these negotiations," Vex announced, striding towards the group. "This technology belongs to the Voth people, and we will decide how it is used." James stepped forward, his expression calm but determined. "Counselor Vex, with all due respect, this technology is the result of collaboration between humans and Voth. Its potential benefits are too great to be claimed by any one group." Vex's scales darkened with anger, but before he could respond, James continued. "I propose a joint human-Voth research initiative. We can work together to develop this technology further, sharing the benefits equally between our species." Aura moved to stand beside James, her voice clear and confident as she addressed the assembled group. "Imagine what we could accomplish together. We could end the water crisis on Zephyria, but that's just the beginning. This collaboration could lead to advancements in agriculture, medicine, and countless other fields." Her words had a visible impact on the Voth, even some of Scar's former supporters nodding in agreement. Captain Chen, listening intently, began relaying the proposal to her superiors. The tense atmosphere was suddenly broken by a low, ominous rumble. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, sand shifting and sliding in unnatural patterns. "What's happening?" Captain Chen shouted, struggling to maintain her balance. James's eyes widened as he saw a massive serpentine form breaching the surface of the sand dunes. "Look out!" he yelled, pulling Aura to safety as a colossal creature erupted from beneath the earth. The sand leviathan, as James would later dub it, towered above them. Its segmented body was covered in iridescent scales that shimmered in the sunlight. Multiple rows of sensory appendages quivered along its length, clearly attuned to the vibrations produced by the water-generating technology. In an instant, the political tensions were forgotten as humans and Voth alike scrambled for safety. James found himself coordinating with Voth security forces and even Scar's combat-trained followers. "We need to draw it away from the camp," James shouted. He turned to Scar, who nodded grimly in understanding. "My people can provide a distraction," Scar offered, gesturing to his followers. "We have sonic disruptors that might confuse its senses." Captain Chen joined them, her military training kicking in. "We can use the scout ship's thrusters to create a sand cloud, obscuring its vision." As the improvised plan was put into action, James and Aura worked frantically to shut down the water-generating prototype, hoping to remove the source of the creature's attraction. The next few minutes were chaos. The sand leviathan lunged and thrashed, its massive body carving furrows in the desert landscape. The combined efforts of humans and Voth gradually began to take effect, driving the creature back towards the deep desert. As the immediate danger passed, a stunned silence fell over the group. Humans and Voth alike stood side by side, panting and covered in sand, united by their shared brush with death. James surveyed the scene, his mind racing with new possibilities. "We need to develop some kind of early warning system," he mused aloud. "Something to detect these creatures before they get too close to settlements." Dr. Zax nodded eagerly. "Yes, and perhaps a non-lethal deterrent. We can't risk upsetting the ecological balance, but we must protect our people." As they discussed potential solutions, a sleek shuttle appeared on the horizon. Ambassador Marcus Reeves had arrived with the human diplomatic team. James and Aura exchanged a look, knowing that the real challenge was just beginning. As the shuttle touched down, kicking up a cloud of sand, they stepped forward together, ready to help bridge the gap between their species and forge a new future for both humans and Voth on Zephyria. The negotiations that followed were intense and complex. James and Aura found themselves at the center of discussions, their unique experiences and perspectives proving invaluable. They worked tirelessly, explaining cultural nuances, clarifying scientific concepts, and helping to find common ground between the two species. As the talks progressed, James and Aura managed to steal a moment alone. They stood atop a sand dune, watching the twin moons of Zephyria rise over the horizon. "We've come so far," Aura said softly, her scales shimmering in the moonlight. James took her hand, marveling at how natural it felt despite their physiological differences. "We have," he agreed, "but I can't help feeling this is just the beginning." Aura turned to face him, her eyes searching his. "What about us, James? A human and a Voth. It won't be easy." James smiled, reaching up to gently caress her scaled cheek. "Nothing worth doing ever is, but we've already overcome so much. Whatever challenges come our way, we'll face them together." Their intimate moment was interrupted by the sound of alarms blaring from the human shuttle. They rushed back to the camp, where they found Captain Chen staring grimly at a holographic display. "Long-range sensors have detected a fleet of unknown ships entering the system," she announced, her voice tense. "They're on an intercept course for Zephyria." James and Aura exchanged a worried glance. Just as it seemed they were on the verge of a breakthrough in human-Voth relations, a new and potentially dangerous element had entered the equation. The delicate balance they had worked so hard to achieve was once again at risk, and the future of both species on Zephyria hung in the balance. The tense atmosphere in the camp intensified as the unknown fleet drew closer to Zephyria. James and Aura stood side by side, watching the holographic display with growing concern. "Those ships," Aura whispered, her scales rippling with anxiety. "They're unlike anything I've ever seen." James nodded, his brow furrowed. "Not human or Voth design. This changes everything." Captain Chen's fingers flew over the console, analyzing the incoming data. "I'm detecting advanced energy signatures. Whoever they are, their technology far surpasses our own." Ambassador Reeves stepped forward, his diplomatic instincts kicking in. "We need to present a united front. Captain Chen, can you establish communication with the incoming fleet?" Before Chen could respond, Dr. Zax interrupted. "Wait, look at their flight pattern. They're not behaving aggressively. It seems calculated, precise." As if on cue, a transmission crackled through the comm systems. A melodious voice, neither human nor Voth, filled the air. "Greetings, people of Zephyria. We are representatives of the Galactic Federation. We come in peace and wish to make formal contact." A collective gasp rippled through the assembled group. James felt Aura's hand tighten around his own. Ambassador Reeves quickly took charge. "This is Ambassador Marcus Reeves of Earth. We welcome you to Zephyria and look forward to peaceful dialogue." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. A landing site was hastily prepared near the caves where the water-generating technology had been demonstrated. James and Aura found themselves at the center of preparations, their unique position as a bridge between humans and Voth making them invaluable. As the Federation ships entered the atmosphere, their advanced technology became apparent. The massive vessels descended with barely a whisper, raising minimal dust despite their size. James watched in awe as the ships touched down with pinpoint accuracy. A sleek ramp extended from the lead ship, and a delegation of Federation officials emerged. At their head was a tall, elegant alien with iridescent skin and 4 arms. Her appearance was both captivating and slightly unsettling. "I am High Counselor Zara of the Galactic Federation," she announced, her voice carrying effortlessly across the landing site. "We have been observing your civilizations for some time, waiting for the right moment to make contact." Ambassador Reeves stepped forward to greet her. "High Counselor, we are honored by your presence. I present to you representatives of both human and Voth peoples." As introductions were made, James couldn't help but notice the intense interest the Federation representatives showed in the water-generating technology. High Counselor Zara's eyes seemed to linger on the prototype device. "We have been most impressed by your recent technological breakthrough," Zara said, her multiple arms gesturing gracefully. "The potential to aid drought-stricken worlds across the galaxy is immense." James felt a mix of pride and unease at her words. The technology that had brought hope to Zephyria was now drawing the attention of a vastly more advanced civilization. As discussions progressed, the Federation's offer became clear. They were willing to provide advanced terraforming technology in exchange for access to the water-generating research. The proposal sent ripples of excitement and concern through the human and Voth representatives. During a particularly intense moment of negotiation, James found himself explaining the unique properties that led to the technology's development. It was actually a combination of my, reproductive fluids and Voth DNA that... He stopped short, realizing too late the implications of what he had revealed. The Federation representatives' interest visibly intensified, their gazes fixed on James with newfound fascination. High Counselor Zara stepped closer, her iridescent skin shimmering. Fascinating, and this combination occurred naturally? James swallowed hard, feeling suddenly exposed. Not exactly. It was an accidental discovery during my captivity. The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Captain Chen moved protectively closer to James, while Aura's scales darkened with concern. Counselor Vex, seeing an opportunity, spoke up. High Counselor, we would be more than willing to share our research findings in exchange for your advanced technology. Perhaps we could arrange for further study of the human's unique biology? James felt a chill run down his spine. The idea of being subjected to more tests, more probing, filled him with dread. Scar, who had been quietly observing, suddenly stepped forward. No, we cannot allow outsiders to exploit our people or our allies. This technology is Voth, developed on Voth soil. We should not share it with anyone. The room erupted into heated debate. James found himself at the center of a storm of competing interests. He caught Aura's eye across the room, seeing his own confusion and fear mirrored in her gaze. As arguments raged around them, Dr. Zax approached James quietly. I think I may have a solution, he whispered. My team has been working on synthesizing the key components of your reproductive fluids. If successful, it could eliminate the need for your direct involvement. James felt a glimmer of hope, but it was tempered by the knowledge that the situation had grown far more complex than he could have ever imagined. As High Counselor Zara called for order, James realized that the fate of not just Zephyria, but potentially countless worlds across the galaxy, now hung in the balance. The debate showed no signs of reaching a quick resolution. With tensions rising, Ambassador Reeves suggested a recess. Let us take some time to consider all aspects of this situation, he proposed. We'll reconvene in 1 hour to continue discussions. As the various factions dispersed, James found himself being ushered into a secure room along with Aura, Captain Chen, Dr. Zax, and key representatives from each group. The fate of Zephyria, the future of human-Voth relations, and James's own freedom were now on the table. As they settled in to weigh their options, James couldn't shake the feeling that whatever decision they made would have consequences far beyond anything they could imagine. As the group settled into their seats, Dr. Zax cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. I believe I have a solution that could address our most pressing concerns, he announced, his voice tinged with excitement. My team has been working tirelessly on a prototype device we're calling the genetic replicator. James leaned forward, intrigued. What exactly does it do? Dr. Zax's eyes gleamed with pride. It can synthesize a close approximation of your reproductive fluids, James. This innovation could eliminate the need for your direct involvement in future research. The room erupted into a flurry of whispers and exclamations. Captain Chen raised an eyebrow, her analytical mind already at work. How accurate is this approximation? Our initial tests show a 97% match to James's unique genetic markers, Dr. Zax replied. With further refinement, we believe we can push that to 99%. High Counselor Zara's multiple arms moved in a graceful gesture of interest. This is most intriguing. Such technology could have far-reaching applications beyond water generation. James felt a wave of relief wash over him. He glanced at Aura, who nodded encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, he addressed the group. I think we should consider sharing this technology with the Federation, he said. It could benefit all of us while ensuring my personal freedom. Aura stepped forward, her scales shimmering with drive. James is right. This is an opportunity for galactic cooperation and scientific advancement. We shouldn't let it slip away. However, Counselor Vex's voice cut through the murmur of agreement. Absolutely not. This genetic replicator gives us a unique advantage in the galactic community. We must keep it secret. The room descended into heated debate. Human and Voth representatives argued back and forth, their voices rising in intensity. James watched as the fragile alliance they had worked so hard to build threatened to fracture. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. Alarms blared throughout the compound. Captain Chen rushed to a nearby console, her fingers flying over the controls. "Multiple sand leviathans approaching," she shouted over the din. "They're heading straight for the settlement." The arguing ceased immediately as the gravity of the situation sank in. James's mind raced, recalling his encounters with the massive desert creatures. "We need to work together," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "I have an idea, but it'll take all of us to pull it off." High Counselor Zara nodded, her iridescent skin pulsing with an otherworldly light. "We stand ready to assist. What do you propose?" James quickly outlined his plan, drawing on his knowledge of Earth's desert creatures and combining it with Voth technology and Federation weaponry. As he spoke, he could see the diverse group coming together, united by a common threat. "Captain Chen will need the scout ship's thrusters again," James said. "Dr. Zax, can you modify the sonic disruptors to emit a frequency that might disorient the Leviathans?" As the group sprang into action, James caught sight of the genetic replicator prototype sitting on a nearby table. An idea formed in his mind, a risky one, but potentially game-changing. "Aura," he called out, "I need you to help Dr. Zax protect the genetic replicator. It might be our best chance at a long-term solution." Aura's eyes widened in understanding. "James, what are you planning?" He gave her a grim smile. Something stupid and probably dangerous, but it might just work. Before anyone could stop him, James grabbed a small signal beacon and rushed out of the compound. He could hear Aura calling after him, but he pressed on, his heart pounding in his chest. The sight that greeted him outside was chaos incarnate. Massive sand leviathans, their serpentine bodies undulating through the dunes, bore down on the settlement. Federation ships hovered overhead, their weapons systems charging. James activated the beacon, its pulsing signal mimicking the unique energy signature of his reproductive fluids. He began to run, drawing the attention of the nearest leviathan. "Come on, you overgrown sandworm," he muttered. "Follow me." The creature turned, its massive head swiveling towards James. With a thunderous roar, it gave chase, its bulk carving a furrow through the desert landscape. As James ran, he could hear the sounds of battle behind him. The coordinated efforts of humans, Voth, and Federation forces were holding the other Leviathans at bay, but he knew their success hinged on his ability to lead the largest creature away. His lungs burned as he pushed himself to the limit, the searing heat of the desert sun beating down on him. The Leviathan gained ground with each passing second. Just as James felt his strength beginning to fail, he heard the familiar whine of the scout ship's engines. Captain Chen's voice crackled over his comm unit. "Hold on, James. We're coming in hot." The scout ship swooped low, kicking up a massive cloud of sand. James felt strong arms grab him, pulling him to safety as the ship rocketed skyward. From his new vantage point, James watched as the disoriented Leviathan thrashed in the sand cloud, unable to locate its prey. The combination of the sonic disruptors and the Federation's energy weapons slowly drove the creatures back into the deep desert. As they returned to the settlement, James saw the aftermath of the battle. The combined forces had successfully repelled the Leviathan attack, but not without cost. The makeshift buildings were damaged, and the genetic replicator prototype lay in pieces on the ground. James's heart sank at the sight, but as he landed, he saw Aura and Dr. Zax already hard at work, salvaging what they could of the device. "James," Aura called out, relief evident in her voice. "You're all right." He nodded, still catching his breath. "Barely. How's the prototype?" Dr. Zax looked up from his work, his expression a mix of frustration and purpose. "Damaged, but not beyond repair. With some work, we should be able to get it functioning again." As the dust settled, James noticed the changed atmosphere among the gathered representatives. The shared experience of facing a common threat had shifted perspectives. Even Counselor Vex seemed less antagonistic as he approached. Ambassador Reeves stepped forward, his diplomatic instincts kicking in. "I believe this experience has shown us the value of cooperation," he said. "Perhaps there's a way we can all benefit from this technology while maintaining necessary safeguards." High Counselor Zara nodded in agreement. "A joint research initiative, perhaps, involving all our species?" As discussions began anew, this time with a spirit of collaboration rather than competition, James felt a glimmer of hope. The genetic replicator, once a source of contention, now seemed poised to become a symbol of interspecies cooperation. Aura slipped her hand into his, her scales cool against his skin. "We did it," she said softly. James squeezed her hand, knowing that while they had overcome this challenge, the future held many more. The establishment of the Trilateral Galactic Research Initiative was just the beginning. As plans for the new facility on Zephyria took shape, James couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the desert planet might hold. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden commotion. Captain Chen was staring intently at a holographic display, her brow furrowed in concentration. "James! Aura!" she called out. "You need to see this. Long-range sensors are picking up some very strange energy signatures from the unexplored regions of Zephyria." As they gathered around the display, James felt a familiar mix of excitement and apprehension. Whatever lay hidden in the depths of the desert, he knew it would change everything once again. James and the others crowded around the holographic display, their eyes fixed on the pulsating energy signatures emanating from Zephyria's unexplored regions. The rhythmic patterns seemed to dance across the screen, captivating and mysterious. "What do you make of it, Captain?" James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Captain Chen's fingers flew across the console, adjusting parameters and enhancing the image. "It's unlike anything I've ever seen. These energy patterns don't match any known natural phenomena." Dr. Zax leaned in closer, his multiple eyes blinking rapidly as he processed the information. "The signatures appear to be emanating from deep underground. Could it be related to the planet's water generation capabilities?" High Counselor Zara's iridescent skin pulsed with excitement. "We must investigate this immediately. It could be the key to solving Zephyria's water crisis once and for all." James felt a familiar surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. He turned to Aura, seeing his own mix of anticipation and apprehension reflected in her eyes. "Looks like we've got another adventure on our hands," he said with a wry smile. Over the next few days, plans for an expedition took shape with remarkable speed. The newly formed Trilateral Galactic Research Initiative proved its worth, bringing together the best minds and technology from human, Voth, and Federation resources. James found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. He worked alongside Dr. Zax and Federation engineers to design vehicles capable of withstanding Zephyria's harsh desert environment. The result was a fleet of sleek, multi-terrain vehicles that combined the best of all three species' technologies. As the day of departure approached, James couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. He stood at the edge of the settlement, gazing out at the vast expanse of sand dunes stretching to the horizon. Aura approached, her scales glinting in the early morning light. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. James nodded, his eyes still fixed on the distant dunes. "As ready as I'll ever be, but I can't shake the feeling that we're about to uncover something big." Aura placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, her touch cool against his skin. "Whatever we find out there, we'll face it together." The expedition set out at dawn, a convoy of vehicles snaking across the desert landscape. James and Aura led the way in the lead vehicle, with Captain Chen coordinating from the air in a modified scout ship. Dr. Zax and a team of scientists followed close behind, their vehicle laden with advanced scanning equipment. As they ventured deeper into the unexplored territory, the terrain became increasingly treacherous. Massive sand dunes loomed before them, their crests whipped into frenzied patterns by howling winds. The vehicle's engines strained against the challenging landscape, a testament to the harsh realities of Zephyrian exploration. On the third day of their journey, they encountered their first major obstacle. A monstrous sandstorm materialized on the horizon, its swirling mass of sand and debris stretching as far as the eye could see. "All units, prepare for emergency protocol Sigma," Captain Chen's voice crackled over the comms. "Deploy sand shields and form a defensive perimeter." James and Aura sprang into action, guiding their vehicle into position. With a series of mechanical whirs and clicks, protective shields extended from the vehicles, interlocking to form a protective dome around the expedition. The storm hit with the force of a tidal wave, Sand and rocks pelted the shields, creating a deafening cacophony. Inside their protective bubble, the team huddled together, monitoring their equipment and waiting for the storm to pass. Hours ticked by, each moment feeling like an eternity. Just as the tension reached a fever pitch, the sensors began to register a change. "Energy levels are spiking," Dr. Zax called out, his voice barely audible over the storm's roar. "It's coming from directly beneath us." Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. James felt a surge of panic as he realized what was happening. "Everyone, brace yourselves," he shouted. "The ground is giving way." With a thunderous crack, the desert floor collapsed, sending vehicles and crew plummeting into darkness. James reached out, grabbing Aura's hand as they fell. The world around them became a blur of sand and shadow. Their descent came to an abrupt halt as the vehicle's emergency systems kicked in, deploying grav cushions that slowed their fall. As the dust settled, James found himself in a vast underground cavern, the likes of which he had never seen before. Massive pillars of crystal-like material stretched from floor to ceiling, pulsing with an inner light that bathed the cavern in an otherworldly glow. Strange angular structures dotted the landscape, their purpose as mysterious as their origin. As the expedition team regrouped, the true nature of their discovery began to sink in. They hadn't just found a natural formation, they had stumbled upon the remnants of an ancient, highly advanced civilization. Dr. Zax's voice quivered with excitement as he examined the nearest structure. "These markings, this architecture, it's unlike anything in our historical records. We may be looking at the remains of a species that predates all known galactic civilizations." James and Aura exchanged a look of wonder and trepidation. As they began to explore the vast underground complex, neither of them could shake the feeling that they were being watched by unseen eyes, their every move scrutinized by the ghosts of a long-dead world. Little did they know that their discovery was just the beginning. Deep within the heart of the ancient city, a dormant machine stirred, awakened by the presence of beings it had not encountered in millennia. The secrets of Zephyria were about to be unveiled, and the consequences would reshape the future of not just the planet, but the entire galactic community. As the team stood in awe of their surroundings, a low rumble echoed through the cavern. The ground beneath their feet began to vibrate, and the crystal pillars pulsed with increasing intensity. "What's happening?" Aura shouted over the growing din. Before anyone could respond, a blinding flash of light erupted from the center of the cavern. When their vision cleared, they saw that a massive panel had slid open in the floor, revealing a complex array of machinery beneath. James approached cautiously, his heart racing. As he neared the edge of the opening, the machinery whirred to life, gears spinning and lights flashing in a dizzying display. Suddenly, a holographic interface materialized before him, its ethereal glow casting strange shadows across the cavern. James reached out instinctively, his fingers brushing against the intangible surface. The interface pulsed in response, and a stream of data began to flow across its surface. "It's responding to me," James said, his voice filled with wonder and confusion. Dr. Zax hurried to his side, his multiple eyes darting between James and the interface. "Fascinating. It appears to be keyed to your genetic signature, James. But how is that possible?" Before they could ponder this further, the ground shook violently. The crystal pillars began to pulse in rhythm with the machine, and a low hum filled the air. The team watched in amazement as the cavern walls seemed to ripple and shift, revealing hidden passages and chambers. "We need to get back to the surface," Captain Chen's voice crackled over the comm. "Something big is happening up here." As they made their way back to the surface, using the emergency ascent systems in their vehicles, they were unprepared for the sight that greeted them. The once barren landscape of Zephyria was undergoing a dramatic transformation. Massive geysers of water erupted from the ground, forming rivers and lakes where there had only been sand moments before. Green shoots began to sprout from the newly moistened soil, growing at an impossible rate. "It's like the entire planet is coming to life," Aura whispered, her eyes wide with amazement. James nodded, his mind racing. "The ancient device we activated, it must have triggered some kind of planetary-wide system." As they watched the landscape change before their eyes, Captain Chen's voice cut through their awe. We need to coordinate our efforts immediately. This transformation could have far-reaching consequences. James snapped into action, his training kicking in. Aura, we need to set up monitoring stations across the planet. Dr. Zax, gather your team and start analyzing these new plant species. Captain Chen, can you use the scout ships to map the changes from the air? As the team dispersed to their tasks, James couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled upon something far bigger than they could have imagined. The implications of such advanced technology, capable of transforming an entire planet, were staggering. Over the next few days, the Trilateral Galactic Research Initiative team worked tirelessly to keep up with the rapidly evolving ecosystem. James found himself constantly on the move, coordinating efforts between the various research groups and exploration teams. During a rare moment of respite, James stood atop a newly formed hill, surveying the transformed landscape. The once endless sea of sand had given way to a patchwork of lakes, rivers, and verdant growth. In the distance, he could see the glint of sunlight reflecting off newly uncovered structures, their alien architecture a stark contrast to the natural beauty surrounding them. Aura joined him, her scales shimmering with a newfound vibrancy that seemed to match their revitalized surroundings. "James," she said, her voice filled with excitement, "you need to see what we've discovered." She led him to a makeshift research station where Dr. Zax and a team of Auth scientists were hunched over various specimens and readouts. The air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar flora. Dr. Zax looked up as they approached, his eyes blinking rapidly in excitement. "James, the plant life here, it's unlike anything we've ever encountered. The water retention capabilities are off the charts. If we can understand and replicate this, it could revolutionize agriculture across the galaxy." As James examined the data, a call came in from one of the exploration teams. "James, this is Survey Team Alpha. We've uncovered something big. You need to see this for yourself." Without hesitation, James and Aura boarded a nearby scout ship and headed towards the coordinates provided by the survey team. As they approached, they saw a massive structure emerging from the receding sands, its sleek lines and towering spires defying the passage of time. Landing near the site, they were met by the survey team leader, her face a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Sir, we've managed to access what appears to be the main chamber. There's something in there you need to see." James and Aura followed her into the structure, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and hovering above it was another holographic interface, similar to the one they had encountered in the underground cavern. As James approached, the interface sprang to life, filling the chamber with a soft, pulsating light. A voice, ancient yet clear, began to speak. "Greetings, human. We are the aquifers, guardians of worlds and shapers of life. Your presence has awakened our legacy on this world, a failsafe we left behind millennia ago. The transformation you witness is but the first step in restoring balance to Zephyria." James and Aura exchanged stunned glances as the implications of this revelation began to sink in. The voice continued, each word seeming to rewrite their understanding of galactic history. "We encountered your species long ago, in its infancy. We saw potential, and we prepared. Zephyria is one of many worlds we seeded with our technology, waiting for the day when humanity would be ready to take its place among the stars." As the hologram flickered and expanded, filling the chamber with images of worlds and civilizations long past, James felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. They had not just discovered the remnants of an ancient civilization. They had unlocked a legacy that would reshape the future of the galaxy. The voice of the aquifers faded, leaving James, Aura, and the survey team in stunned silence. The enormity of their discovery hung heavy in the air, along with the unspoken question, what would they do with this newfound knowledge and power? As if in response to their unasked questions, the ground beneath them trembled once more. In the distance, they could hear the sound of massive structures shifting, emerging from their long slumber beneath the sands of Zephyria. The planet's transformation was just the beginning, and James knew that their greatest challenges and opportunities lay ahead. The transformation of Zephyria was accelerating at an alarming rate, and with it came unforeseen complications. A violent tremor shook the ground, nearly knocking James off his feet. He steadied himself against a nearby console, his eyes scanning the rapidly changing landscape outside. The once barren planet was now a tapestry of green and blue, but the beauty was marred by ominous storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "James!" Aura's voice crackled through his comm unit. "We've got a problem. The energy fluctuations from the polar structure are intensifying. They're causing severe weather patterns and seismic activity across the entire planet." He rushed to the makeshift command center, where holographic displays showed a planet in turmoil. The newly formed rivers were swelling beyond their banks, and the lush vegetation was being battered by gale-force winds. Dr. Zax's multiple eyes blinked rapidly as he processed the incoming data. The ecosystem is showing signs of extreme stress. If we don't stabilize the energy output soon, we could lose everything we've gained. Captain Chen's face was grim as she outlined their options. "We need to access the polar structure and recalibrate the aquifer technology. It's the only way to bring the planet back into balance." James nodded, his mind racing. "But how do we get past the security systems? They've repelled every attempt we've made so far." A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. Then Aura spoke up, her voice quiet but determined. "There might be a way," she said, her scales shimmering with nervous energy. "The aquifer message mentioned that they encountered humans long ago. What if we could combine human and Voth DNA, create a hybrid genetic key that could unlock the facility's defenses?" The implications of her suggestion hung in the air. Dr. Zax was the first to respond, his scientific curiosity overriding any ethical concerns. "It's possible," he mused. "We could use a modified version of the genetic replicator to create a temporary hybrid sequence. But the risks..." James met Aura's eyes, understanding passing between them without words. "I'll do it," he said firmly. "Use my DNA for the procedure." The next few hours were a blur of frantic preparation. As Dr. Zax and his team worked to develop the genetic merging process, James and Aura prepared themselves for the grueling task ahead. In a sterile lab, James watched as Aura was connected to an array of medical devices. The air was thick with tension and the acrid smell of disinfectant. "Are you sure about this?" James asked, his hand resting gently on Aura's arm. She nodded, her eyes filled with grit. "We don't have a choice. The planet is dying, James. We have to try." As the procedure began, James remained by Aura's side, his presence a comforting anchor. The process was agonizing to watch. Aura's body convulsed as it struggled to integrate the foreign genetic material. Her scales rippled and shifted, taking on a faint, iridescent sheen. Hours passed, marked only by the steady beep of monitoring equipment and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. Finally, Dr. Zax announced that the procedure was complete. Aura's eyes fluttered open, their colors subtly altered. "James," she whispered, her voice hoarse. He squeezed her hand. "I'm here. How do you feel?" She sat up slowly, flexing her fingers and rolling her shoulders. "Different. Stronger, somehow. And I can sense things I couldn't before." There was no time to fully explore the extent of the changes. As soon as Aura was cleared by the medical team, they set out for the polar structure. The journey was treacherous, their transport buffeted by howling winds and pelted with debris from the increasingly unstable landscape. As they approached the facility, its defenses roared to life. Energy beams lashed out, carving furrows in the ground around them. Autonomous drones swarmed from hidden ports, their weapons primed. James and Aura moved in perfect synchronization, their newly forged connection allowing them to anticipate each other's movements. Aura's enhanced senses allowed her to detect incoming attacks before they struck, while James's quick thinking helped them navigate the complex defenses. They reached the main entrance, a towering monolith of alien metal and pulsing energy fields. A circular platform before the door began to glow, projecting a series of complex, shifting patterns into the air. "It's a puzzle," Aura realized, her eyes darting over the holographic display. "We need to solve it to gain entry." Together, they tackled the challenge, their complementary skills allowing them to decipher the alien logic. As the final piece fell into place, the massive doors began to slide open with a low, resonant hum. Inside, they found themselves in a vast chamber dominated by a colossal biomechanical construct. Tendrils of energy arced between organic-looking nodes and crystalline structures, creating a dizzying display of light and motion. "This must be the central node of the aquifer control system," James said, his voice filled with awe. They approached the central console, its surface coming to life at their presence. As they began the delicate process of recalibrating the system, the facility's internal defenses activated. The rest of their team fought desperately to hold off waves of security drones, buying James and Aura the time they needed. The recalibration required more than just technical skill. James and Aura found themselves physically connecting with the biomechanical construct, their minds merging with the ancient technology. In that moment, they perceived Zephyria as a living, breathing entity, its complex systems intertwined in a delicate dance of life. As they neared completion, a surge of energy threatened to overwhelm them. James felt as if his very atoms were being torn apart. He gritted his teeth, focusing on the warmth of Aura's hand in his, the steady rhythm of her breathing. With a final, monumental effort, they completed the recalibration. The chamber filled with a blinding light, and for a moment James feared they had failed. Then slowly the energy levels began to stabilize. The violent tremors subsided, and the howling winds outside fell silent. As they disconnected from the construct, James and Aura stumbled, exhausted but triumphant. Through the facility's viewports, they watched in amazement as Zephyria underwent yet another transformation. This time, however, it was a controlled, harmonious process. Rivers found their proper courses, forests settled into sustainable growth patterns, and the atmosphere cleared, revealing a sky of breathtaking beauty. The planet had found its balance, a perfect synthesis of the ancient aquifer design and the new changes brought by their arrival. As they made their way back to the research base, James and Aura knew that their work was just getting started. The successful melding of human and Voth genetics had opened up a world of possibilities, and with it, a host of new challenges. The knowledge they had gained from the aquifer technology could revolutionize terraforming efforts across the galaxy, but it also came with an immense responsibility. Captain Chen greeted them at the base, her expression a mix of relief and apprehension. "We've managed to stabilize the planet, but we've got a new problem on our hands. The Trilateral Galactic Research Initiative has gotten wind of our discovery. They're demanding a full report and immediate access to the aquifer technology." James and Aura exchanged a worried glance. They had unlocked a power that could reshape worlds, but in the wrong hands, it could also destroy them. As the implications of their discovery began to sink in, they realized that their greatest challenge still lay ahead, deciding how to proceed with their newfound knowledge and abilities in a galaxy that might not be ready for such power. James and Aura exchanged a worried glance, the weight of their newfound responsibility settling heavily upon them. Before they could respond to Captain Chen, a flurry of activity erupted outside the research base. Through the large observation windows, they watched as a fleet of sleek interstellar vessels descended from the sky, their hulls gleaming in the light of Zephyria's transformed atmosphere. The ships bore the insignia of various galactic nations and scientific institutions, a clear sign that word of their discovery had spread far beyond the Trilateral Galactic Research Initiative. As the visitors disembarked, James and Aura stepped outside to greet them, their hands intertwined. The crowd that gathered was a kaleidoscope of alien species, each more diverse than the last. Among them, James spotted a familiar group of humans making their way towards him. "Mom? Dad?" he called out, his voice cracking with emotion. His parents rushed forward, enveloping him in a tight embrace. "We're so proud of you, son," his father said, his eyes glistening with tears. As James introduced his family to Aura, he noticed the curious glances directed at their subtly altered appearances. The genetic merging had left its mark on both of them. James's skin now had a faint scale-like sheen, while Aura's features had taken on a more human-like quality. Dr. Zax approached, his multiple eyes blinking rapidly as he scanned the growing crowd. "It seems our work has garnered quite the attention," he observed. "Perhaps we should move this gathering to a more suitable location?" They led the visitors to the newly established conference center, a structure that seamlessly blended Voth architecture with the lush vegetation that now covered Zephyria's surface. As they walked, James and Aura marveled at the transformation around them. Crystal-clear streams flowed through verdant valleys, and in the distance they could see the spires of Voth cities rising above the treetops, no longer confined to the underground. Inside the conference center, Captain Chen called the assembly to order. "Welcome to Zephyria," she began, her voice carrying across the room. "What you see here is the result of a groundbreaking collaboration between humans, Voth, and the ancient aquifer technology." As Chen spoke, holographic displays flickered to life, showing the planet's dramatic transformation. Gasps of awe echoed through the room as the attendees witnessed barren deserts giving way to thriving ecosystems in a matter of days. James and Aura stepped forward, their unique physiology drawing intense scrutiny from the gathered scientists. A Xelian researcher, her tentacles quivering with excitement, approached them. "Is it true that you underwent a genetic merging process?" she asked, her translator struggling to convey her eagerness. Aura nodded, her scales shimmering. "Yes, it was necessary to interface with the aquifer technology and stabilize the planet's transformation." The room erupted into a flurry of questions and exclamations. Dr. Zax raised his appendages, calling for calm. "We are still studying the long-term effects of their transformation," he explained, "but preliminary results suggest that this could open up new avenues for interspecies, adaptation, and medical treatments." As the day progressed, James and Aura found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of scientific discussions and diplomatic negotiations. Representatives from various worlds expressed interest in applying the aquifer technology to their own ecological challenges. "We must proceed with caution," James warned during one such discussion. "The power to reshape worlds comes with great responsibility." Aura nodded in agreement. "We propose establishing a galactic council to oversee the application of this technology. No single species or government should have unilateral control over such power." As night fell, James and Aura retreated to a quiet balcony overlooking the transformed landscape. The twin moons of Zephyria cast a soft glow over the new forests and lakes, creating a scene of breathtaking beauty. "It's hard to believe how much has changed in such a short time," James mused, his arm wrapped around Aura's waist. She leaned into him, her scales cool against his skin. "And yet, I feel like our journey is just beginning," she replied. As they stood there, contemplating the future, a shooting star streaked across the sky. It was a fitting symbol for the new era they had ushered in, one of hope, cooperation, and limitless possibilities. In the days that followed, Zephyria became a hub of galactic activity. The Trilateral Galactic Research Initiative expanded its facilities, welcoming scientists from hundreds of worlds. James and Aura found themselves at the forefront of this new frontier, guiding research into the applications of aquifer technology. Their work led to breakthroughs in terraforming techniques, allowing for the restoration of numerous dying worlds. As news of their success spread, more and more species sought their expertise. One afternoon, as they oversaw the testing of a new environmental stabilization protocol, James turned to Aura. "You know, when I first came to Zephyria with my breeding juice, I never imagined it would lead to all this." Aura laughed, a sound that still sent shivers down James's spine. "Life has a way of surprising us," she said, her eyes twinkling with amusement and affection. As the sun set on another day of discovery and progress, James and Aura stood hand in hand, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. The transformation of Zephyria was just the beginning of their journey together, a journey that would reshape not just one world, but the entire galaxy.
If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.